Well, good afternoon. I want to welcome everybody today and apologize for the delay in getting started. We were just wrapping up votes, so I think the three of us each ran back as quickly as we could to join this event and talk about this important legislation. So really the purpose of today is to talk about how we can secure fairness in healthcare for our military families. And I'd like to thank Congressman Mike Waltz for partnering with me on this effort. I think that this is an example of how Washington should work. Members of both parties across the aisle come together and work to find a solution and solve a problem. And Mike and I are both veterans, so this is an important issue for both of us and for so many people we serve in our districts and across the country. I also want to thank Congressman Moore, another one of my fellow House Armed Service Committee members, for joining us today and for your co-sponsorship and your support of this legislation. Also, it's important to note that the Military Officers Association of America, as well as the National Military Family Association, have endorsed this legislation, and your advocacy on this and so many issues and unwavering support for veterans and their families is truly inspiring and critical in our military community and with our military families. We also have Keith Reed with the Air Force Sergeants Association, and thank you for being here today, and thank you for all you do for military families. And I think Keith will also be saying a few words later. I'll also be introducing some other speakers. I just want to say that I'm grateful to all of you for coming today to help share your story about how this legislation could impact you and your families. And we'll hear from those military family members later. So earlier this year, Congressman Waltz and I introduced the Healthcare Fairness for Military Families Act. The aim of this legislation is pretty simple. It's to allow people who are covered by TRICARE to continue to stay on their parents' coverage up until the age of 26. The current legislation allows those military family members to stay on their parents' TRICARE if they're full-time students up to the age of 23, but there's a gap in coverage, and there's additional fees required for those young people to use the TRICARE Young Adult Program. As a contrast, people who are covered under the Affordable Care Act and private insurance don't have that additional fee, and they're actually covered on their parents' plan up until the age of 26. So it seemed really obvious that we needed to fix this, especially the children of those people who are serving our country in uniform should have access to the same healthcare benefits as the rest of the community. And I'm really glad that Congressman Mike Waltz agreed to work on this legislation with me, as well as the other co-sponsors and the so many veteran service organizations that support our veterans. I have a few examples of how this would affect some families I've talked to in my district. One person I'm thinking of is Jimmy Smith from Yorktown, and he told us that this legislation could save him close to $500 every month, which is almost $6,000 a year. Rhonda from Virginia Beach, whose 22-year-old daughter has 3 jobs but no benefits. Her daughter's TRICARE Young Adult premiums increased from $325 in less than a year to $460 each month. Another constituent, Mary from Virginia Beach, she and her husband combined have 53 years of military service. Their daughter is 17, and they are also worried as she becomes older what they're going to do about healthcare coverage for her. So I think it's our responsibility in Congress to ensure that our service member families have access to the same quality healthcare and under the same conditions, allowing young people to stay on their parents' plans up till the age of 26 as the rest of the community, all those who have private health insurance and coverage under the Affordable Care Act. So I'm very pleased to see that this is endorsed by so many veteran service organizations, and I look forward to working with all of them, many of whom have representatives on the call today, to help promote the Healthcare Fairness for Military Families Act this Congress. And I would like to now turn it over to Representative Mike Waltz from Florida so he can say a few words about the legislation and share some stories about why this is important to him and his constituents.
Yeah, thanks, Rep. Luria. Appreciate it, and really pleased to continue working on this with you. And it's great to see more members on both sides of the aisle getting on board. I agree with you wholeheartedly that this is how Congress should work, and it's yeah, not as bad as it would often seem on national mainstream media. That there are many of us that are here to get things done, roll up our sleeves, and move legislation that will improve the lives for our veterans. For those on the call, I'm a Special Forces officer by background, and I'm still serving in the National Guard, still a colonel in the National Guard. I personally am on TRICARE Reserve Select, and I understand and I hear from guardsmen and women, but also active duty men and women all the time, particularly as most are approaching that 17, 18, 20 year mark. They often have high school or college age children, and they're making those tough decisions about whether they continue to serve or they move on to the private sector. Healthcare and healthcare for their children is often a key factor. So from what I'm seeing and hearing, that this is a retention issue. We want to retain so much of that experience that the country has invested into these servicemen and women for so long. And I think Rep. Luria is absolutely right in terms of just creating some parity with what people are seeing in the private sector in terms of those health plans. And regardless of our many disagreements on the Affordable Care Act, I think one area of bipartisan agreement, one area has been pre-existing conditions, and another area has been dependents staying on plans until age 26, particularly as so many young people who are fortunate to be able to go to college, but are unfortunate to come out of it loaded with a lot of debt, and as they struggle to get on their feet. I think there's just a number of benefits across the board here at a fairly minimal cost. So happy to work with you, happy to work with the others, and look forward to moving this through it's a standalone bill, but also probably moving it through the NDAA process and getting this across the goal line for our men and women in uniform. Thanks so much. And I don't know if I'm handing off to Rep. Moore or not.
I was going to call on Rep. Moore next. Thank you, Representative Waltz, Mike, for being a co-sponsor of this and working with me on this again. Very excited as well that we have another member of Congress, a new member from Utah, Representative Blake Moore, who also serves with Mike and me on the Armed Services Committee, who joined us today. And Blake, would you like to say a few words?
I would love to. Thank you so much. Thanks, Rep. Luria, for organizing the event, and Representative Waltz for your comments. I'll build on it quickly. That standalone bill is what you said. Rep. Luria said makes sense, sensible. We can work together. So I'm honored to co-sponsor HR 475, Healthcare Fairness for Military Families Act. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, I'm committed to advocating for the interest of well-being of our men and women in uniform, and in particular today and for their families. HR 475 would greatly help our military families by allowing young adults to stay on their parents' TRICARE until they're 26, mirroring the current provisions in private civilian healthcare policies. TRICARE is one of the best health insurance plans in the country and one of the strongest incentives for Americans to continue serving in the National Guard. By extending the policy for young adults in military families until age 26, we can relieve financial burdens brought on by healthcare and ensure military families receive quality insurance for as long as possible. This is especially important as our military struggles to attract and retain qualified service members. And I appreciate Representative Walt's comments on that same front with respect to what we can do in the long run with that retention and the cost savings that are associated with that. Is something that everybody should be committed to, not only for the mission of our military, but for their family's sake. We want to be able to incentivize that. Utah, in particular, where I hail from, is home to over 143,000 veterans and 8,000 National Guardsmen. I'm honored to represent them in my support of this bipartisan, common sense legislation. We must continue to look out for our well-being of our nation's service members and their families. And HR 475 is a great step in doing that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative Moore. So glad to have you with us in Congress and supporting this bill. So welcome. And I agree with both you and Mike. This is an important issue for retention. So that is really something that people look at as they determine whether they should stay in the military for a full career in order to achieve those benefits that come with full service and retirement. they make those decisions for their family as well, because we know it really takes the whole family to serve. And like Mike, I've served for a full career, served for 20 years, and my husband for 27 before we each retired. So this is really important to families like ours and so many others in our communities. And I have a few people here today who are going to actually share their stories about why this bill is important to them and why it would help their families. I'd first like to call on Annie Brock. Annie, can you unmute and share your story with those who are joining us today?
Thank you, Congresswoman Luria. Everybody, my name is Annie Brock. I'm an Army veteran. My husband, Jeff, retired from the Air Force. Between us, we served on active duty for 32 years. We have 2 adult daughters, son in love. I'm here today in support of HR 475 to improve the TRICARE Young Adult Program. I'm thankful to Mrs. Luria and Mr. Waltz and their co-sponsors for introducing this legislation. It's been a very long time in coming. My family won't benefit from it, but it's something that would have made a positive difference for us when our daughters were 24 to 26 years old. I'm happy to share our experience so that you understand why it needs to be passed. In 2014, while our non-military friends and family members covered their young adult children at minimal additional cost under their regular family health care policy, my husband and I paid $156 per month for daughter number 1. Over the next 2 years, the premium increased by 50% each year. When daughter number 2 turned 24, we started also paying the monthly premium for her. There were 4 months when we paid for both daughters over $600 each of those months. In the final year that daughter number 2 was eligible, her university coverage as a graduate student became cheaper, so we moved her to the policy. I did the math. It cost us over $13,000 in TRICARE Young Adult premiums over those 5 years. I know of one retired military family that was forced to tell their daughter that financially they couldn't afford the premiums and helped her enroll in the state Medicaid program. I heard just this morning from a family about their 21-year-old college student daughter who had an accident this past fall. She suffered a brain injury and had to withdraw from college, making her ineligible for their regular family TRICARE. In addition to the monthly premium they were required to immediately pay, they had to pay the catastrophic cap. If they were a civilian family, they could have put their full focus on their daughter. Because they are a military family, they had to focus first on sending nearly $4,000 to TRICARE, and then they could focus on their daughter. Today, military families are paying $459 per month per child. The premiums have increased 40% over the last 3 years. And on top of the outrageous premiums, the copays for TRICARE Young Adult are higher than family TRICARE Prime copays. My family won't benefit from this legislation, but the military is one team. Regardless of service or era, we are bound to the families on our right and left, in front of us, behind. We must be faithful to each other. So enough is enough. As military families, we make many sacrifices to serve our nation. There is no reason we should be financially penalized in a way that other American families are not. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Annie. Really appreciate you sharing your story and your advocacy for all those families who could benefit from this change in the future. And thank you and your husband and your family as a whole for your service in the military. The next person I'd like to introduce is Susan Roeder. Susan, can you share your story with those who've joined us today? Susan, I'm sorry, you're muted still. We can't hear you. No, okay, it showed that you unmuted, but I still don't hear you. So maybe Susan, if it's okay, I can move on to our next person, and then we will come back to you and we can see if we can help you troubleshoot the sound. The next person is Kaylee Tewitt. Kaylee, we would love to hear from you.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, perfect, awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my story and represent military dependents who are, I guess, no longer dependents. My name is Kaylee Tewitt. I am a current, so I recently graduated college, May 2020, And so I am 23 years old. So I hope my experience will help others in the future. And I'm really passionate about this because I've spent the last year paying for my own benefits. So I left college for spring break, as most college students did, in the beginning of March 2020. And little did I know, I was never going to complete my senior year at school on campus, nor did I anticipate working a job for a year with no benefits and a year following college while in a pandemic. Some might call it luck, but I've been exceptionally blessed to have been able to come back to my part-time job that I held all throughout college, as well as come home to a family who was able to support me during this challenging time of coronavirus. When May 18th, 2020, my graduation date came and went, and there was still no hopes of not only a different job, but a career, I was responsible for getting health insurance, as I knew it wouldn't be wise of me to be uninsured with the state of the world in a health crisis. 5 to 6 days a week, I worked at my part-time job with half of my first biweekly check going towards health insurance. For the first few months, it wasn't as difficult for me to reach this monthly payment, but then mid-year, I needed to buy a new car, with another huge portion of my money not only just going towards health insurance, it was going towards a car. It was going towards a car payment as well. I can tell you right now that if it wasn't for me living at home for the past year, not paying rent, as well as other adult expenses such as utilities, I would not have been able to afford health insurance at all. I also want to say as well that I've been very fortunate to not have student debt. That's another very big role that plays into, health insurance, and how technically I'm not a child, but how could a 23-year-old balance all these bills without even a full-time job as well? Coming from someone who has been raised in the military for 23 years, that's my whole life, as my dad has been active duty for 26. It's my desire to see other dependents, such as my 2 younger sisters, afforded the same opportunities as some other health insurance have. I hope my story has helped shed some light on that, and I hope that we can really change for our military families and our military children who are no longer going to be dependents. Thank you.
Well, Kaylee, thank you for sharing your story with us. And, I think it really hits home to hear from someone who is that age, 23 years old, and facing this situation right now about why this legislation is important. So hearing that from you, I'm sure Representative Waltz and more, also hear those stories, from many people in their districts. And it really means a lot to know who the people are who we're going to be able to help with this kind of legislation. I'd like to go back to Susan Roeder. Let's see if the sound is working now. No, Susan, I'm sorry we can't hear you. We really want to hear from you. And an idea might be for you to log out of the Zoom and log back in and make sure that you're connected to the right audio, either through your device or the internet. No, I'm sorry, the sound is not working, but we have one more speaker, and that should give you a few minutes to try to join back again and figure out how we can connect you to the sound. The final person we have speaking is Keith Reed. Keith, we would love to hear from you next.
Thank you all very much, and hopefully you can hear me. It is indeed an honor to be joined by my fellow colleagues as we express support for HR 475, Healthcare Fairness for Military Families Act. As announced, I am Keith Reed. I'm the Chief Executive for the Air Force Sergeants Association, a federally chartered veteran service organization dedicated to protecting and improving the quality of life of military family members past and present and their families. On behalf of the and 75,000 members I would like to begin by extending my sincere gratitude to Congresswoman Luria and Congressman Walt for introducing HR 475, the Healthcare Fairness in Military Families Act, and to Congressman Moore for your support as well. As a 20-year veteran, Air Force veteran, and a retired first sergeant, I would like to also personally thank Representative Luria and Waltz for your service to this country in uniform, and to each of you all for your continued service as you legislate through the halls of Congress and your public service to this great nation. A critical milestone for the AFSA's Quality of Life mission is to expand access for affordable healthcare coverage, lower costs, and improve quality and care coordination for beneficiaries and their families. Without question, the Healthcare Fairness for Military Family Act meets this standard. Since the passage of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act in 2010, civilian parents have been able to cover their dependents on their insurance plans until the age of 26, regardless of marital status, academic aspirations, residency, and even outside coverage availability. The intent of this provision was simple: to protect parents, children, and young adults who were worried about losing their health care coverage. Unfortunately, just over 1 decade later, this protection is still not afforded to military families in the same manner, and worries about health care coverage and affordability remain steadfast. Under the current law, military children are eligible for standard TRICARE coverage until either their 21st or 23rd birthday, while military children can enroll in TRICARE Young Adult Program until age 26. There are serious concerns about the program's viability given raising premiums, decreasing enrollment numbers, and various other factors that affect the nature of beneficiary cost sharing. Last week, I spoke to an AFSA member who's currently dealing with over $500 a month for his son's TRICARE coverage alone. And he expressed how hard that was for him to maintain that. While this story is experience shared by those impact the day-to-day, by the experience shared by those this issue impacts, the most may be individualistic by circumstances. Together, they are representative of a systematic issue that impacts the military community as a collective, especially during a global pandemic where employment markets have proven to be volatile and access to affordability of healthcare is of the highest priority. Military families should be protected in the same manner that their civilian counterparts. With the passage of the Healthcare Fairness for Military Family Act, we can accomplish just that. As such, the Air Force Sergeants Association is proud to support this bill, and we are looking forward to continuing to work with you and other members of Congress to secure the passage of this act into law. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate the Air Force Sergeants Association and so many other VSOs who are joining together to help advocate for this bill. It really means a lot that you're working so hard on behalf of our military families. And it looks like Susan Roeder is back, maybe from a different device. If you want to unmute, we would love to hear from you. It looks like you're muted, so can you?
Okay, are we on?
We're great. We can hear you. We can hear you now. Wonderful.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
We figured it out.
I'm thankful to have a daughter who does more Zoom meetings than I do, so she's here with me today. First, I did want to thank Representatives Luria, Waltz, and Moore for their staff for bringing this issue forward on behalf of military families. As a military spouse, I never expected special treatment. But as a parent, I do believe military children deserve parity with all other children in our country. But when it comes to health insurance and sadly other issues, that's just not the case. My name is Susan Roeder. My husband served as an active duty Army chaplain for almost 29 years. We have 2 daughters who used TRICARE Young Adult. And during the past 4 years, our family has spent over $4,000 on TRICARE Young Adult premiums and over $23,000 on out-of-pocket expenses for unreimbursed medical bills for a TRICARE approved surgery. I'd like to briefly share the TRICARE Young Adult experience we had with our oldest daughter. With a lot of hard work, Madeline finished her undergraduate degree in 3 years at age 21. And at graduation, she lost her TRICARE benefits. For the sake of continuity, our only option was to enroll her in TRICARE Young Adult, with monthly premiums of over $200 a month at the time. With plans to work for a year before going on to graduate school, she took a full-time position as a research assistant at the University of Kentucky, studying the effectiveness of drug treatment programs. But her $12 an hour job did not offer medical benefits. We thought TRICARE Young Adult premiums would be a short-term expense because based on regulation AFI 36-3026 and information provided by our Fort Jackson Deers office, we knew she'd be eligible to return to Deers and TRICARE when she enrolled in graduate school full-time. However, that's not what happened. Over a 4-month period, I had conversations, emails, filed appeals with local Deers personnel, TRICARE Young Adult specialists, and the Defense Manpower Data Center. I was eventually told that although a student going directly from a 4-year undergraduate program to graduate school would seamlessly have coverage until age 23, that did not apply because our daughter took a 1-year break. So because of her hard work and early graduation, she was not eligible to re-enroll in Deers and TRICARE until the first day of graduate school classes, as if a student can apply, be accepted, register for classes, and enroll on the first day. Although first day of classes does not appear anywhere in the regulations, that's the standard that Deers personnel are using. In our case, our daughter was accepted at American University in February, but she was not able to re-enroll in Deers and TRICARE until August, leaving us with over $1,200 in premiums during just that period. Our children go through a lot as being part of the military family. We lived outside the continental United States away from extended family for 8 years. They were separated from their father for 3 years. Neither of our girls could drive a car until they were in college because we lived in Germany during their high school years. And they will never go and visit their many childhood homes. That's why our kids need to be resilient. But our children should not have the added financial burden of going from military dependent to TRICARE outcast as they transition to adulthood. I hope that every representative who appreciates the sacrifice of military children will vote for passage of HR 475. It's time to end TRICARE Young Adult and provide healthcare parity for our kids. And thank you for taking this project on for all of us.
Well, thank you, Susan. I really appreciate you sharing your personal story and that of your daughters and your family. I just want to note that we do have representatives from numerous other veteran service organizations who've joined us today who are supportive of this legislation. And really thank you for being here. And I wanted to leave some time here at the end for any of the press who are with us, who have questions. And I'll turn it back over to Owen because I know he's been tracking whether anyone has submitted questions or indicated they would like to ask a question.
Sure, Congresswoman. We have a question here from Patricia Kime, Military Times. I'm asked her to unmute herself so she can ask that question, and hopefully she's able to do so.
Yes,
Patricia, you there?
I just wanted to know if you have a CBO score for this bill yet, and what are your expectations that you might be able to pass it this year, because it was, last year you tried as well.
Well, thanks, Patricia. Thanks for joining us. And I know you've been with us before when we've talked about this legislation. The CBO score for this bill is estimated to be 125 million. And that I consider in the large scale of the resources that we provide to our military families and healthcare I think it's a cost that is worthwhile to be able to take care of our military families and help with these issues that we've heard from so many people today, as well as the concerns about retention that Representative Waltz and Moore highlighted. And how do I feel about it passing? You know, I feel really good. We have a bipartisan effort here. We have so many veteran service organizations who believe strongly in this, so many families who can attest to how this has impacted them directly. And we intend to work as hard as we can to make sure that this can pass this Congress. And Mike, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words on that as well.
Yeah, well, no, I would just say that Rep. Luria and I've found that legislating sometimes can be a marathon as much as it can be a sprint. We're working together. We're determined. Again, it not only shows bipartisanship, but shows Army and Navy can work together as well too. And I just point to, I was just on a call this morning about the widow's tax for Gold Star families, and they worked that for 15 years. I pray that we get this done this year. I know we're working hard with committees, and I want to commend Rep. Luria and her team for really gathering the amount of support that they have across the VSO communities, and that matters when we're looking at when we're looking at cost trade-offs, and when we're dealing with both the services, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, and the various committees of jurisdiction. This strong level of support does matter, and I'm confident we'll be able to work with the committee staff, work with the chairman and ranking member to get this over the goal line.
Well, thank you, Mike. And it looks like maybe we have one more question, Owen.
One more question from Patricia, and then we'll close things out.
I just wondered what kind of reaction you get on the Hill regarding this, just because civilian American families, pay an average of like $20,000 a year for their health care and have been, most of their careers. And when you compare, the $500 or $600 premium of a retiree's TRICARE Select or TRICARE Prime added with the TYA, it still does not come close to what the average American family pays for healthcare. So I'm just wondering how, what kind of reaction you get and what the sort of selling point that you're trying to make to people who might think that this is not a priority.
Well, Mike, I don't know if you want to take that one or if you want me to go first, or Blake, if you want to comment.
Yeah, well, look, I'll tell you, the folks that I engage, there's just such enormous support and appreciation for what our military does. It's less than 1% of those serving. And when you put it in the context of the sacrifices that they already make, we all know how deployed and over deployed often the Navy is. I come from the special operations community where we have special operators in 60 to 70 countries any given day as we speak. So I don't think there's any type of resentment, pushback when we say that our military members should have parity in terms of what's out in the private sector and that this is a retention issue. And the other piece, I think there's definitely agreement that we have to arrest and get our arms around the cost of healthcare. There's probably a lot of disagreement on how we get there, but I think there's agreement that we have to drive down costs in the private sector and within government. I mean, it is one of the fastest growing portions of the defense budget, and I hope the leadership of both parties, that we can come together and take that on in coming Congresses.
Well, thanks, Mike. I don't know, is Blake Moore still on? Maybe he had to go. What I would say, Patricia, is that when I tell people about this bill, they're actually surprised. They're like, what do you mean? I thought everyone could stay on their parents' coverage until 26. And to find out that not only is it not universal to everyone's coverage, but that it's actually just disadvantaging the dependents or children of military families like, that's not fair. That's basically the response that I get back. And so, as soon as we, make people aware of this and they learn about it, I think that they're enthusiastic about helping and supporting, because, truly military members and their families make sacrifices, as Mike described about deployments and, long times away from home. You heard Susan that she and her family lived overseas for 8 years. Her husband was deployed away from the family for 3 additional years. I mean, that's typical of a military family. And to know that, military families are already making those kind of sacrifices, and then somehow they just don't get the same parity in their healthcare coverage for their children when they become young adults. I think that, people are eager to make sure that they are treated at least equally to everyone else in the community.
Hey, Elaine, if I could just dive in for one more comment there. I think it probably also depends on where you are in the country. I mean, you have a tremendous military presence in your district. In Florida, we have 21 military bases. I was just down in the Tampa area where we have both Central Command and Special Operations Command at MacDill Air Force Base. Certainly tremendous support there. Up in Jacksonville, where we have 2 Navy bases, Pensacola, where we have another. So I think part of it just depends on your interaction and your and the kind of density of military families in the community. But I know there's certainly a lot of support in the communities where we come from, and particularly in Florida with, gosh, I think almost 75,000 active duty National Guard and reservists in the state.
And Mike, I would say the same thing about in Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area, and in my district, 1 out of every 5 people is either active duty military, a veteran, or a family member thereof. So, this impacts a wide swath of our community, and I think that it is something that we need to continue to work hard on, because it affects so many people in our communities. So.
Thank you both.
Great, thank you, Patricia. I guess one last call if anyone from the press has any questions, or if you don't want to ask in this forum and want to follow up with Owen or Mike Waltz's team via email, we can certainly provide any additional information you'd like about the legislation.
I think that's it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to say thanks again to my colleagues, Mike Waltz and Blake Moore, for joining today, and then everyone here representing the VSO and military family community, and those reporters who took time to report about this important issue. And we will look forward to seeing it move forward in this Congress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have
Thank you.
a great day.
Thanks.